Try again. Okay, so that was great. That was a great example for me of individual reframing, or personal reframing. Is there a way of doing this on a more like team level or organizational level?
That's a great question, Vitali. There certainly is. So this reframing process works at both the individual and the systemic level. So let me give you an example of a company I was consulting to called, well, let's call it Build Pro. So it was a construction company with over 20,000 people. So essentially, the company had grown up at a time where there were what we call soft contracts. So soft contracts are where the company would do a construction project and it would get paid for its time and materials.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, it would get paid a margin. So the contract was called a soft contract. Irrespective of what the expenses were on the job, the company would still secure its agreed margin on top. So in this environment, the managers in the company took up a role of what I would call relationship managers. So their role was very much to manage the relationship with the client and to keep the client happy. Okay, so over the decades, the environment started to shift and clients started to feel more pressure and wanted to pass some of those cost pressures onto the contractors. So they started to implement more of what we call hard contracts. So hard contracts are where you agree a fixed price and you've got to operate within that hard contract and to manage your finances very carefully. Otherwise, you pay more than you're actually being paid for the job. So in the hard contract environment, what happened was the relationship managers didn't change their role map. So they were still framing their role as relationship managers. So when the client would come to them and say, can you please implement an extra 100 meters of copper piping on the job and can you do that for free? The managers would go, oh, I'm a relationship manager. My role is to keep the client happy. So they would say yes, despite the fact that it was going to cost the company money. So what was happening in this hard contract environment was that the company was losing money. And it was actually a turnaround situation. So rather than putting in more technical training, which they have been doing, so they've been giving contract managers finance training, for example, they've got to become better at managing the budgets and better at managing the finances. But the same pattern kept repeating itself. So what we did was come in and say, we've got to reframe the role from relationship managers to commercial managers. So that role reframe where the project managers or the contract managers started seeing themselves as commercial managers helped the organization to come through this financial dip and up the other side. So they started to take up their role much more commercially, to see themselves as having to manage their budgets, to see themselves as having to not just manage the relationship with the client, but also to manage the financials on the particular jobs that they were managing. So rather than layering in technical solutions, which is we've got to train them, we had to also do the adaptive work, which is that we had to reframe their role at the same time. Technical training wasn't enough. The adaptive work of reframing the role map in the manager's heads was the complementary work that happened at the same time.
Wow, that makes sense. Totally. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.